Today, I am welcoming Dr. Yosi Amram to the podcast. Yosi is a licensed clinical psychologist, a CEO leadership coach, and a best-selling and award-winning author. Previously the founder and CEO of two companies he led through successful IPOs, Yosi has coached over 100 CEOs, many of whom have built companies with thousands of employees and revenue in the billions. In addition to working with individuals, Yosi works with couples interested in passionate, conscious relationships that serve their psycho-spiritual healing and growth. With engineering degrees from MIT, an MBA from Harvard, and a PhD in psychology from Sophia University, he is a pioneering researcher in the field of spiritual intelligence whose research has received over 1,000 citations. As an Amazon best-selling author of the Nautilus Book Award gold medal winning Spiritually Intelligent Leadership, How to Inspire by Being Inspired, Yosi is committed to awakening greater spiritual intelligence in himself and the world. Well, hi everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attachment Theory in Action podcast. Yosi, I am so excited to welcome you today. Spiritual intelligence is not a topic that I have covered before on the podcast, and I think that it's such a wonderful, deep topic, and I think that so many of our listeners are going to benefit from hearing from you, your story, and the work that you have done and are doing. So welcome.
Thank you, Kirsty. I'm delighted and for your welcoming comments and warm welcome smile. And yeah, we'll see how this goes.
Absolutely. So, Yosi, my listeners know I love to start the podcast with the same question. Um, and really because we know how much our early life experiences impact us as we journey through life and become adults. And so tell us a little bit about your early experiences and anything that's really shaped and driven you to get to where you are today and the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, no, it's an important fundamental question. And let's see. So I was born and raised in Israel, which is a war-torn part of the world. So I know we tend to think about attachment theory and what shapes us as our early experiences, but I think also it's important to understand our transgenerational trauma and history and how that affects our nervous system and is just being better and better understood. So just in terms of context, my parents were refugee immigrants that escaped Iraq and pogroms following Second World War and came to Israel. They lost everything and so on. Had to start over. And my mother was pregnant with me during a time in 1956 where Israel was engaged in a war and there was a buildup. So I was in my mom's womb and belly. Well, there was a lot of external anxiety. And then during my delivery and shortly thereafter, my father had to be uh, drafted for the war. So, I mean, all of that, is not conscious memories, but I believe as I've done deeper and deeper work to understand my own anxieties and sense of safety and trust in life, I think those are important experiences that were there. Now, going forward from there, I was an only child. My dad worked two jobs to build for their future and also went to school. So he was very absent during my early days. And unfortunately, also my parents didn't always necessarily have the best relationship, and there were difficulties there. And being an only child, I kind of felt that tension. And in some cases, there was a triangulation between them, and then they were using me. So that didn't create the psychological safety in the environment that made me feel seen, understood, supported. I was kind of, both within the family unit and in the soci, the context of the society, the Israeli society involved in wars and existential threat, really informed, I think, my nervous system and sense of safety. So that's one important piece. fast forward at following the end of high school, as all young men at age 18, I was drafted into the military. And I was a shy, introverted, math and science kind of kid. But to my surprise, I rose through the ranks in the Israeli military very fast, had all these promotions and awards and so on. But despite my success in that environment, if one can call it that, the command and control model of the military, which is necessary in battle, you don't have time to have a family meeting around the table, the dinner table, or a team meeting in a conference room at a work environment and discuss and build consensus. You have to, someone calls the shot. It's important and necessary in battle. It doesn't inspire the best in people. And that kind of got me interested in how to build organizations and the topic of leadership to that will bring out the best in individuals, which led me to ultimately become an entrepreneur and come to the US and build some companies and to create a different culture and lead based on different set of principles. And during that experience, I got burned out. I had a dark night of the soul. I had a spiritual awakening experience, which kind of shook my life, threw me, in fact, into a manic episode, and became kind of a traumatic experience where I was forced out of the company I started, which was really painful and sad. But it also got me to ask these deeper existential questions about why the business and the company were so meaningful and important, and why did I burn out overworking towards it, and what were these spiritual experiences, were they real and delusional? And that then led me to go back and get a PhD as a psychologist, both so I can understand myself and also help people that I coach and work with. And that got me to be a psychologist, a leadership coach, and also someone who works with couples, because a lot of the things I talked about early on also shaped my relationships with and my romantic partnerships. So I was trying to, and that is also a deep passionate interest of mine. So anyway, I hope I kind of gave you a sense of how these things relate and bring me to today, where uh, what my work is, and my mission and my purpose is to help awaken greater spiritual intelligence in myself and in the world. And I do that through sort of two core applications. One is in the domain of leadership and people in the work environment, to create, communities and shared teams and organizations that are aligned around the sense of purpose and mission and values, that creates a sense of belonging and community for people, which is so important today because we're dealing with loneliness epidemic. So many people are isolated and so on, and work is the primary environment. And then the other thread, besides the leadership, is this notion of relationships and how spiritually intelligent, conscious relationship could be a fertile ground for psychospiritual healing and growth for both individuals. And that's the other area where I work with couples, and about to start engage in a study with couples to see how attachment theory, spiritual intelligence, and emotional intelligence all contribute to relational satisfaction. So I'll stop there.
Well, yeah, we can, let's definitely unpack. And there are a few things that I'm holding on to in my mind that I want to pull out from what you described, because, well, firstly, what a journey you have been on, and thank you for allowing us just a little bit of insight, particularly into some of the traumatic areas of your past and your family's history as well, and their experiences. I definitely would like for us to, hold space for your family, and for those families who are also currently still experiencing those times of war. Um, You
Yeah, in
know,
the Middle East and elsewhere. And my point is that we tend to think of attachment as just our primary caregiver.
Mhm.
And I think what I'm trying to allude to is that a sense of secure attachment and bond and safety in life is influenced mostly by the primary caregiver and our nuclear family, but I think it's beyond that also.
Absolutely. And all of those factors that are impacting the primary caregiver to then be able to provide that security and safe space for the infant and the newborn. And that was the first thing I was going to pull out is that, I mean, I think we work with a lot of well-intentioned people as professionals, whether it's a professional or a caregiver in the form of a foster parent or an adoptive parent who are they have the best intention, but sometimes that prior to birth life that the caregiver, the woman usually has is so can be so impactful. We have a wonderful relationship with Michael Trout, who has done some fantastic work on the experience of a developing baby in the womb, and your story really made me think of that how hard it must have been for your mother and father to bring you into the world in such circumstances, and then for you to have those experiences and as an infant and a young child in those environments. So I think you're absolutely right that we should think of attachment from the perspective of the caregiver, but we have to think about it in the context of the greater world of the caregiver that they're living in.
Yeah, and I think implicit in what you're saying, just to draw it out, is the caregiver, the mother, early on there's this dual unity, some call it, and certainly when I'm in the womb, if there are stress hormones, anxiety hormones, whatever running through my mother's bloodstream and physiology, that is running through the infant and the embryo. So we're immersed in the same sort of neurotransmitters and stress hormones. So if my mother is experiencing anxiety, that's right there that I'm experiencing anxiety as much as she tries to regulate herself or not.
Hmm. Something else that you mentioned that stood out to me was particularly your work with, these larger kind of corporate organizations and how and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is what you're really trying to do is help CEOs or other members of leadership create a secure attachment environment for their employees.
Yeah, and then now there's research that talks about the payoff for creating an environment of trust. And when there's psychological safety and there's trust among team members, I mean, it's even now understood that that releases oxytocin, which is, some call the love hormone or the connection hormone. And when you have an environment that's saturated with trust and oxytocin, people are more creative, there's less absenteeism, there's more creativity, more productivity. So yeah, I mean, like it or not, and there's also unconscious process of projection. Oftentimes, employees will project a father or a mother figure on their leader. And, so to the extent the leader is offering, and, we have to be careful with our boundaries. I mean, we're not doing therapy in the workplace, but we do want to create an environment of safety and trust that can bring out the best in people and creates the loyalty and camaraderie and the sense of belonging that then supports their productivity and thriving. And then they go home and then that ripples out through them. But we'll come back to one of the key words I want to highlight is this word of trust.
Mhm.
And it's so foundational, to any relationships is trust, and trust in life, trust in ourselves, trust in our secure bond, trust in the integrity of the leaders, trust in our romantic partners. So I think the concept of trust is foundational to our functioning and well-being and to spiritual intelligence and to secure attachment. So we'll talk some more, I'm sure, about how trust kind of threads through all of those.
Well, I think that leads me that idea, this idea of having trust in yourself. Um, when you said that, then I was kind of thinking, to me, that is if we understand, if we have what you as talking of as spiritual intelligence, then our ability to trust ourselves becomes easier because we know ourselves. If we fully know ourselves, then we can trust ourselves because we know how we're going to show up for the most part, how we will respond, how we will act in certain situations. So I think for our listeners' benefit, tell us a, tell us a bit more about the difference between spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence, and just give us a bit more of an understanding of what you mean by spiritual intelligence.
Okay, great. Yeah, so emotional intelligence has come into the mainstream over the last 20, 30 years. Originally used to think of emotion and reason in dichotomy. Someone who was emotional was not necessarily reasonable, etc. But what is emotional intelligence? It's a concept that was put forth by two academicians, Salovey and Meyer, in 1990 in their paper. And basically, what emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of and draw on emotional resources to help manage emotions in ourselves and others. So the focus is emotional resources and awareness of those resources and being able to use them. Spiritual intelligence is the ability to draw on and embody spiritual resources as opposed to emotional resources, and then use them to help our functioning and well-being in daily life. So you say, well, what are these spiritual resources? So these are the qualities and virtues that have been celebrated and cultivated through all the world's spiritual traditions for thousands of years. So across all the traditions, in my doctoral research, interviewing 71 spiritual teachers and leaders from all the world's traditions, whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, shamanism, Taoism, the virtues of purpose, service, trust, gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, humility, presence are the qualities that have been celebrated throughout all their traditions, all these traditions, regardless of their cosmology and theology, regardless of their belief system. So spiritual intelligence is the ability to draw on these resources and embody them in daily life. So now that's going to result. So both of them involve knowledge of the self. Emotional intelligence is awareness of one's emotions and emotional resources. Spiritual intelligence is the self-knowledge, the knowledge of who and what we are is at the foundation that then when we're connected to that, these qualities start to naturally manifest. So I'm kind of backtracking a little bit, like, why am I calling that spiritual intelligence? Because these qualities are uniform or universal across all the spiritual traditions. The other thing is that all these qualities I mentioned, like purpose, service, compassion, trust, naturally emerge when we connect to our essence, to our spirit, to our, which is really comes from Latin, the animating breath of life. It's basically our life force. We have, as human beings, we have a body, but we have a life force that animates it. And when we're connected to that life force, that's our spirit, then naturally we feel empowered, we feel connected, we feel, the call to serve, and all these qualities. So spiritual intelligence is these qualities that have been celebrated through all these traditions, which naturally emerge when we're connected to that spirit, to that life force energy, and that essence. Um, so
And just to clarify, to make
yeah.
sure that our listeners understand that we're not talking about spiritual belief here. There's a difference. And so can you just explain to our listeners what you mean by spiritual belief then versus spiritual intelligence?
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up. The spiritual belief, and also I would add another thing called spiritual experience. So, spiritual belief is, I might believe in a deity like God. I might have a belief in reincarnation of the soul, or the immortality of the soul, or in the afterlife, or whatever it is. That would be a spiritual belief. And I might have a spiritual experience. I might be meditating, and when I meditate, I feel one with the universe, my ego dissolves, whatever. I go to church on Sunday and I pray and I feel connected to a higher power, or whatever it is that my spiritual practice and framework is. So I can have an experience. I can also walk in the forest and feel one with nature, and I'm all of a sudden integrated into nature. I'm not separate. So that would be a spiritual experience, instead of experiencing myself as a separate individual, egoic self versus and so on. So that's spiritual experience. So spiritual belief, spiritual experience, could be valuable and helpful, but spiritual intelligence is not that. It might build on that, but it has to do with how I embody these qualities that I mentioned of compassion, forgiveness, trust in my work meeting with my colleagues. With my romantic partner, when I'm driving on the freeway and I am, in this metal box we call a car, and then there are all these other metal boxes trying to get on the ramp or off the ramp, and we're all kind of running around, competing with each other. So do I feel my interconnectedness then? Do I feel my connection to humanity and others, or do I feel like it becomes a zero-sum game where I'm disconnected, I'm lonely, I'm in a fight or flight mode, etc. Or so spiritual intelligence is these qualities as they are embodied, and these resources as I draw on them in daily life, not just when I go to church or synagogue or temple on my weekend, or when I at home praying and meditating, or whatever my spiritual practice is.
So would you say that, and your driving on the interstate example is a great one, but my brain was kind of going to me, given that becoming spiritually intelligent and really being able to hone in on that connection, I feel like if there are disruptions in an attachment relationship, it can become much harder to do that as an adult. And similarly, if you find yourself in a situation where you're on the freeway and it's hectic, shall we say, then those are some challenges that can impact our ability to connect to those spiritual values that you're talking about. But those are two very different examples. Obviously, I think having a disruption in an attachment relationship is much more significant. But would you agree that those disruptions can make it much harder because yourself has been impacted?
Yeah, and so yeah, you don't have your nervous system is more easily dysregulated. You're not as resourced. So the way when we have attachment rupture disruption, then we know that those people are more susceptible to trauma and adverse, childhood experiences then carry out through that person's life, and make it harder for them to deal with these situations. But the point I'm also trying to make is that if we develop spiritual intelligence and we understand, then we could feel some sense of resource in like instead of just thinking, okay, all these people on the freeway are my enemies, so to speak, that I'm competing with. No, I can connect with this thing like we're all human beings, we're all trying to get home. It's rush hour, we just gotta work. And so I feel connected to the other people. So that calms my nervous system because one of the key things that as human beings, and this is the basis of attachment, is that we're social beings. We need to feel our connection to other human beings, starting with our primary caregiver. And when that connection is disrupted and we can't internalize it because that caregiver wasn't there consistently, then we don't trust that connection. We don't feel that connection. Then we get dysregulated because we are organized for co-regulation for we might talk about interpersonal neurobiology. Our whole system is organized to feel connected, and that gives us a sense of safety and trust. We're not safe as a tribal animal in the jungle if we're on our own. We need to feel our community and our family. So connection is superly critically important for our sense of safety and well-being and nervous system regulation. And that shows up in attachment and as children, as infants, and all of that. And then when that's disrupted and we don't have the resources, then it's much harder to be on the freeway. But if we then what I guess what I'm trying to say is that one way to try and help our attachment is to cultivation of our spiritual intelligence, because then we feel get greater trust in life, more connection, more resources.
So I have a kind of a side note question. I know we've identified a few topic areas, but something that you're talking about made me think about. So when you're working with CEOs, for example, and the goal is ultimately to create a change within the work environment, how much of how much of the time is spent working with the CEOs doing for them to do individual work? Because I think a lot of the time people, not CEOs, but just people in general, kind of want a fix without having to do much of the work themselves, like that it requires. And so I'm just curious, in order to get that workplace change, is most of the emphasis on the individual work of the CEO?
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, and I get this with my clients that sometimes coming to me and, they want to be more effective as leaders, more empowered, more inspired, more inspiring, more powerful, etc. And I'm always like, turning it back on themselves. And the point is, you cannot inspire anybody else. You can't create a sense of safety and trust for anybody around you if you're not rooted in yourself. So leadership, first and foremost, is an inside job. We can't inspire anybody until and when we're inspired ourselves. We can't create a sense of safety and trust in our team in the future, that what we're doing as an organization, if we can't find that sense of safety and trust within ourselves, that sense of wholeness, that sense of inner confidence, which goes back to a sense of trust in ourselves, in life, and other people. Because it's super hard for people to feel good if their manager or leader doesn't trust them.
Mhm.
And, then they feel disempowered, they're micromanaged. So, that CEO, that leader's difficulty trusting others, loops right back to their original upbringing and the ways they were, their adverse conditions that made it hard for them to trust other people. So
Mhm.
I could tell someone till I'm blue in the face, trust your team, empower your team. But if their nervous system can't relax, and then they could say things, but people are going to feel that it's not a they're not being trusted, they're not being empowered. So That's why a lot of my clients work with me for years. It's not just a typical like coaching engagement where I tell them what to do and okay, make these your five organizational values and whatever. I mean that those are empty words unless they go through the inner transformation, as you're pointing out to that that organization is not transformed. The culture is not transformed. People are not going to feel their trust.
Well, and what you described, Yosi, then is just a complete parallel to your experience when you were born and your infant and young life experiences of your mother and her environment. And over here we have our CEO and their environment, and everything is trickling down to those underneath is not the right word, but it's
That
exactly
are
the same.
dependent on them.
Right, right. Attachment is not just about, not just for child development people. It is just applicable everywhere, which is what I love about the work that you're doing. Um, and so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Let's go back. You were mentioned earlier about some of the research and the study that you were doing. Will you tell us more about the work that you're currently doing, the study on attachment and spiritual
Couple.
intelligence, emotional intelligence? Yes.
Yeah, so but before I do that, I'll talk about the previous research I did do for my doctoral, which was to look at spiritual intelligence and leadership effectiveness. So in that study, I worked with 42 CEOs and 210 members of their staff and looked at their spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, and personality, the five-factor model of personality. And I wanted to see what explained their leadership effectiveness and to see whether, because there is a lot of research that emotional intelligence and certain aspects of personality contribute to leadership effectiveness. So I wanted to see if spiritual intelligence added anything above and beyond that. And indeed it did. So, just to be a little nerdy, emotional intelligence explained 41% of the variance in the outcome of leadership effectiveness. Spiritual intelligence explained 46% of the variance and combined, so which was a slightly bigger effect than emotional intelligence, but combined they were 67%. So that means that they are each have a unique contribution on their own and that they're complementary and multiplicative. So that was that study, and since then, other people have applied this measure of spiritual intelligence in all kind of domains and found that it contributes to satisfaction with life, quality of life, mental health, resilience. So all of those things are obviously also indirectly related to attachment, and that's been done in different cultures, in different languages, in different applications, whether it's business or nurses or school teachers, etc. So I'll just bookmark that and now come back to your question about my current study. So I want to do a similar analogous study with couples. And with couples, there's a lot of work around attachment theory and how a couple's attachment style relates to their satisfaction in their relationship, and whether it's a marriage or a partnership or whatever it is. But we know that, whether someone is anxious, ambivalent, or avoidant, or secure, that those dynamics have a big, those patterns have a big impact on the couple's ability to settle their nervous system and be content and satisfied and settle into secure functioning as a couple or a secure bond where they're both resting in trust in each other and in the safety and the foundation of that relationship. So we know that attachment theory is super important in couples. And my conjecture is that spiritual intelligence is additive and complementary to that. And so my study is beginning with like 50 couples, heterosexual couples that have been together for at least 4 years, over 35-year-old, and administering to them again emotional intelligence, intelligence, attachment assessment, and spiritual intelligence, and wanting to see if spiritual intelligence explains and adds any value in understanding their satisfaction and quality of relationship above and beyond what emotional intelligence and attachment theory does. So the jury's out on it. I'm just beginning the research, but I can say that from my work with couples is that it is, that our ability and it doesn't take brain, uh, science, so to speak, to understand that practicing compassion and forgiveness and presence is going to support the satisfaction we have with our partner, and it's a great environment. Now, you can also say that obviously, as you were intimating, when we have secure attachment, then we have more access to compassion and forgiveness and presence. So the two go hand in hand, they reinforce each other. Spiritual intelligence supports secure attachment. Secure attachment supports our ability to develop these spiritual intelligence qualities and find purpose in life and feel called to serve when we have that secure basis of secure attachment and a sense of centeredness with nervous system regulation.
So, firstly, I am excited to learn what the results are when they come in. You're right. I think it doesn't take, to me, it doesn't take brain science, but for people outside of this field that don't have an understanding about spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, attachment, I think that it's really just fantastic that there's work out there being done in this area to because I feel sometimes, and I've had quite a few guests on recently that are doing work with adults, and our work primarily is with the child and family unit. And I always end up thinking that, man, if more adults knew this, if more people understood, then how much better their lives could be, how much more stable, not to throw in an attachment kind of pun, but how much more stable and how much healthier their lives would be if they had some of this understanding. Um, but I'm also curious about, you know, all the other factors that come into play, that the other barriers, the barriers to accessing these spiritual intelligence qualities, like you use the word presence, and how many other things impact our ability to recognize that need for presence, and how do we actually manifest that in our lives. That kind of brings me to, let's talk a little bit about meditation, and meditation's role in helping people access these qualities.
Okay, great. So if I can rewind just slightly, because you
Sure.
touched on a few things that I think are important. So you said, okay, so you're doing a lot of work around children and so on, but it's super important for adults, and it'd be great if they understood this. And yes, and I'll just tack in one point, which is that, parents creating a secure environment, attachment environment for themselves in their relationship will support the secure attachment of their children. So this is, we have to, when children have disruptions, oftentimes it's because, what's happening among the parents in their family of origin, or, affects them. So not only help them, it would help their children. And we got to disrupt this chain, because people that have, disruptions themselves then propagate it, and when they form relationships, there's a lot of difficulty in those relationships, and that doesn't create the safety for their children. That's the first point. And then related to that is the point about presence. And then we'll come to the meditation. So I was also going to talk about presence and secure attachment. So one of the things we know now is that children that preverbal children between the ages of 12 and 18 months can go into a physiological experience of shame simply when their primary caregiver disconnects from them. So, and a child mother can be in this beautiful connection, whether it's nursing or whatever it is that's happening, they're playing, and then all of a sudden, something smells at the kitchen, and something is burning, or someone knocks at the door, or whatever it is, and then the mother just, oh, so, drops the baby, so to speak, and
Mhm.
then runs to deal with this thing that's burning on the stove. Now, the child doesn't know what's going on. It assumes that something is wrong with it, and it
Mhm.
goes into a physiological state of shame, like taking on that thing. So that's why we grow up thinking, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, whatever, because shame is at the core of that. And the mother could be very well intentioned, and it's just that this thing was burning on the stove, or someone was at the door, or her cell phone rang, or she got a text message. And our ability to be present for each other is like so fundamental to how we experience being loved and cared for. And that's true in business world. If a manager is working with an employee and they have their weekly one-on-one, and then the person is looking at their phone and is late and whatever, the quality of the interaction, I'm going to feel disrespected, etc. And that's true in couples. The people are so many of us are bombarded with all this stuff, social media, text messages, whatever it is, emails that make it hard for us to be present. So right now, I feel you're present. I hope, and that makes me more able to express, like, okay, I'm not just throwing stuff out and it's dropping. No, you're nodding, your facial expression, our connection is here. So I feel that, and that all of that helps me bring out the best in myself. So that happens in so many levels, and certainly happens, as I mentioned, at work, between infant and caregiver, etc. So our capacity to be present, I think, super important, is the quality of spiritual intelligence that has a ripple effect on the quality of our lives. I mean, our life are happening moment to moment, and are we there to be present to our lives or
Mhm.
not? So it affects our well-being and fulfillment from life, and affects people around us in terms of our quality of our connection. So I'm just trying to emphasize why presence is so critical, and it is one of the foundational capacities of spiritual intelligence. Okay.
One of my favorite things to show people is Ed Tronic's still face experiment videos
Yeah.
of the interactions with the child and the mother, and then to have adults engage in that with just a very simple conversation, and the other showing a still face, and it's so powerful to people to see just that, as you said, I'm responding to your cues, and I'm present, and so you're able to successfully express yourself. I'm not, obviously, as I stumbled over my words then, but it always amazes people when they engage in that activity, the impact that just a very minute experience of lack of presence has on their ability to communicate. So anyway, I just
Yeah,
had to
yeah,
bring
no,
that
it's great.
in.
I'm so delighted. Yeah, exactly. So it's the presence and are affecting each other. So we also know now that we have this mirror neurons, and we have this interpersonal neurobiology. So, we're connected at so many levels. We don't even understand how that all works. And so our presence, our attunement, I mean, as another key word we haven't used yet, is attunement. And so, but in order to be attuned, we have to be present. If I'm not present, I cannot be attuned. I have to be present to
Mhm.
myself. I have to be present to the person I'm engaged with, whether it's my child. I have to read their body language, their facial expression, whether it's my work colleague, whether it's my romantic partner. So presence, is key for attunement, and attunement is key for healthy relationships and secure attachment. So, all of this to take us to your question about meditation. And so, what are some of the key skills or elements or capacity that support our presence is intention and attention. So, right now I have an intention. I came here and I have this intention, which is to help articulate what spiritual intelligence is and how it relates to attachment. So I'm carrying that intention in my mind and I have my attention, right? So my attention is on you, on my thought thread, on my body sensation. So I'm trying to integrate all of that. So because otherwise, and this is another thing, is we have this ADHD culture. If I go on a tangent, I go down the rabbit hole, and so my attention is drawn elsewhere, and I forget my intention, then
Mhm.
I am not going to be as effective. I'm going to start losing you. I'm going to go on tangent. I may, and then if I forget to check in to see is she still engaged with me and I'm still on track, if I is what I'm talking about right now still connected to my intention, right? So the two key things is managing my attention and staying track and consistent and aligned with my intention. So that those are two key elements to support my presence in this conversation, this engagement. So why am I highlighting all of that and how does it relate to meditation? So meditation is a practice to build our muscle with attention and intention. So what most meditation practices will pick an object, whether it's a mantra or our breath or the sensations of the breath in the belly or the sensations of the breath through the nostril or whatever it is. And then invariably our attention drifts.
Mhm.
And then we have to remember our intention. No, I'm supposed to focus on my breath and I bring it back. So we drift, we come back. So we're managing our attention and we're building the muscle to keep track of our intention as much as we can in all time. And none of us are perfect. So it's like training ourselves. We train our puppy. We get a new puppy, it veers off and it does its business in the wrong place. And like, no, no, no. This is where your spot as my kitten to do your business. And then over time it learns. And we have our monkey mind and it veers off. And we are living in a culture where more and more people are exhibiting ADHD symptoms, which detracts us from our presence because our attention is fragmented and we're not keeping track of our intention. So meditation is a great practice to build our muscle for attention and intention, which then supports our presence. So I hope I'm making sense in how all that relates to.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I'm thinking about everything that you're saying, and I'm somebody who I've always struggled with meditation in terms because of what you've just described, that constant pull of your attention somewhere else, whether it be as something as kind of significant as, I don't know, you've got some huge family trip planned and you've got so much you have to think about, to something as small as my nose is itching right now. That's always been something that I have struggled with, and I think that just from a person who would be new to doing meditation um, more in depth, that it's something that you really have to to use the same words, you have to put your attention and intention into to really practice it. And I love how you use the kind of, you know words of you're training a muscle in it, like you train other things. It takes practice and time and takes your brain, takes many experiences of it for your brain to make those connections of, oh, I'm doing something different. Now is the time for me to refocus and continue to refocus my attention. So I just love your explanation of it.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to also highlight that a lot of people give up because we feel frustrated. Oh, I'm trying to do this. Oh, and also I'm thinking about lunch, or I'm hungry, or my nose is itching, or what happened yesterday in this conversation with my friend that didn't go so well. So that those all things happen to us and naturally. And then like, oh shit, I forgot to do this and I'm bad at it. So then we
Mhm.
give up because I'm bad at it. So, but it's such a beautiful micro example to see our self-talk and how we judge ourselves instead of like, oh, okay, my thoughts drifted to what happened in my conversation with my friend yesterday and the conflict with him. Okay, yeah, that was important. I'm going to come back to my breath. That's my intention. So right there, I'm practicing two things is my attention and letting go of self-judgment. I'm bad at it. I'm really terrible. I'm never going to learn meditation. It's beyond my ability. I mean, that's all could be our inner dialogue that gets us off practicing it. Now, if you're trying to learn how to play the piano or the violin or any musical instrument, it takes years. It takes years, and none of us are gonna be perfect off the bat, and it's a lifelong journey.
Mhm.
So,
So
I
give
think
ourselves grace.
huh?
We have to give ourselves grace.
Yeah, we have to give ourselves grace and be, it's like as a mini forgiveness, like, oh, my attention drifted. Okay, come back. You wouldn't train your baby, with harshness,
Hmm.
right? I mean, if it's the same thing. It's like my attention, I'm training it like a new kitten, a new baby. And so gently bringing it back. And that's an act of kindness towards ourself, which has many benefits beyond that.
I love that. I think we are far too harsh on ourselves, and especially, when if you think about it from the attachment lens too, that many people who may have those adaptive insecure attachment styles are already very hard on themselves. And so um just to be gentle with yourself, much like you would a child. Absolutely. Uh, Yosi, I mean, I think I could listen to you and talk with you all afternoon if I had the opportunity. I just want to thank you for kind of just introducing us to this world of spiritual intelligence. Absolutely, come back to us and let us know the results of your study. Would love to hear more about that. And I'm hoping that you might even have some other CEOs reach out to you and say, hey, I need to be doing this with my organization. It's just been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been a delight, and I'm honored, and I appreciate your insightful questions and drawing out how these things relate. Secure attachment, attachment in action, spiritual intelligence. These are so fundamental to our well-being as individuals, as couples, as communities, as organizations. So thank you.